The first thing that hits you out here isn't the silence. It's the sheer, overwhelming scale of everything. I remember my first day, stepping out onto the catwalk of the Thornewood Peak lookout tower, 100 feet above the ground, and just stopping. The world fell away in every direction, a rolling sea of green and blue that stretched to a horizon so distant it seemed to curve with the earth itself. The air was thin and tasted of pine and cold stone. It was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen, and I was completely, utterly alone. That was the point, of course. That was what I'd wanted. My name is Alex, and 2 years ago, I signed up to be a fire lookout for the U.S. Forest Service. I'd just come out of a particularly messy chapter of my life, a job I hated, a relationship that had imploded, the general grinding misery of city life. I saw an ad online, a picture of a little cabin perched on a mountain like a nest, and I felt a pull so strong it was almost physical. A summer of solitude, of watching for smoke, of being paid to simply exist in nature. It sounded less like a job and more like a cure. The tower was old, a steel skeleton with a 14 by 14-foot room on top, all windows. The living space was Spartan. A small bed, a desk, a propane stove, and the all-important Osborne firefinder, a big brass disc on a pedestal used to pinpoint the location of smoke. My only connection to the outside world was a crackly radio, with daily check-ins scheduled with a ranger named Sarah, whose voice was always a welcome, grounding presence. For the first couple of weeks it was bliss. I fell into a simple rhythm. Wake with the sun, coffee, scan the horizon, read, cook, scan the horizon, watch the sunset paint the mountains in impossible colors, sleep. The silence I'd initially found so vast began to fill with the subtle sounds of the wilderness, the chittering of squirrels, the distant call of a hawk, the ever-present sigh of the wind through the pines. I felt my frayed nerves knitting back together. The city, with all its noise and demands, felt like a distant, bad dream. It was during my third week that I found the journals. Tucked away in a dusty cabinet beneath the desk, I found a stack of old, leather-bound logbooks dating back decades. They were filled with the elegant, looping cursive of men who had done this job long before me. At first, they were fascinating. Daily weather reports, notes on wildlife sightings, mundane details of life in the tower. June 12, 1978. Clear skies, wind 5 out of the west. Saw a black bear with 2 cubs near the eastern ridge. Little rascals. Finished the last of the coffee. Note to self, ration better. I spent my evenings reading them, feeling a sense of connection to these unseen predecessors, these fellow hermits of the high peaks. But as I got into the journals from the late 80s, the tone began to shift. The entries belonged to a man named Thomas Miller. His handwriting started out as neat and precise as the others, but it grew more erratic over the summer. July 2, 1988. Feeling watched today. Probably just the isolation getting to me. The wind makes strange noises up here. Sometimes sounds, like talking, whispers. A week later, July 10, 1988, I keep seeing something out of the corner of my eye. Down in the tree line. It's tall, taller than a man should be. When I turn to look, it's gone. Just the trees swaying. My mind is playing tricks on me. Then came the first mention of the sound. July 15, 1988. Heard it again last night. A clicking, like a Geiger counter or maybe just a branch tapping on the glass. But there are no branches that high. It's rhythmic. Click, 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 click. I went outside with a flashlight but saw nothing. The sound stopped the moment the beam hit the trees. I put the journal down, a prickle of unease running down my spine. It was just a story, I told myself. A man going stir-crazy from the isolation. Still, that night, as the sun bled out behind, the peaks and the world was swallowed by an ocean of darkness, I found myself listening. The wind moaned around the tower, the steel frame groaning in response. Every creak, every tap of a loose wire against the glass seemed amplified. I told myself it was suggestion, my mind primed by that old journal. But I left the light on a little longer than usual that night. The next day, I tried to forget about it. I went about my duties, my scans of the horizon, my radio check-in with Sarah. I didn't mention the journals. How could I? I didn't want her to think her new lookout was already losing his grip, but the thought of Thomas Miller's words lingered at the back of my mind. That evening, I picked up his journal again. I couldn't help myself. His entries became more and more frantic. July 28, 1988. It's not in my head. I saw it clear, as day, just before sunset. It was standing at the edge of the clearing below, partially hidden by a large fir, so tall and thin, like a tree that had learned to walk. It had no face that I could see, just a long, pale shape. It just stood there, watching the tower, watching me. The clicking was louder. It's not the wind, it's coming from it. August 5th, 1988. I don't sleep anymore. The clicking is constant at night. It circles the tower. Click, click, click. Click. I've barricaded the trap door, but what good would that do? It's 100 feet up. Nothing can get up here, right? Oh God, I just want it to stop. His last entry was short, almost illegible. August 10th, 1988. It knows my name. The wind is whispering my name. Thomas. The logbook ended there. The next entry was from a new lookout, noting that the previous one had left due to a family emergency. I slammed the book shut, my heart hammering against my ribs. It was deeply, profoundly unsettling. I looked out the windows into the inky blackness. The forest wasn't a peaceful sea of green anymore. It was a dark, impenetrable wall, hiding. What? I felt a sudden, crushing sense of vulnerability. Was a man in a glass box on a stick, 100 feet in the air, miles from another living soul. For a few days, life returned to a semblance of normal. I tried to push the journals from my mind. I focused on the beauty, on the majestic sunrises, the soaring eagles, the sheer peacefulness of it all. I was convincing myself that Thomas Miller had just been a lonely man who let his imagination run wild. Then, one evening, I was cooking dinner. The sun had just set, and the sky was a deep, bruised purple. I was stirring a pot of chili when I heard it. Click, click, click. It was faint, almost imperceptible beneath the sound of the wind. I froze, spoon hovering over the pot. I turned off the stove, plunging the room into near silence. I strained to listen. Click, 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 click. It was coming from outside, from down below. It was the exact sound Thomas Miller had described. A cold dread, heavy and suffocating, settled in my gut. My breath hitched. I told myself it was an animal, a woodpecker, anything. But it was rhythmic, mechanical, unnatural. I crept to the window, my heart thudding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I looked down at the small clearing at the base of the tower. In the deepening twilight, the trees were just dark, jagged shapes. I saw nothing, but the sound continued, a slow, deliberate cadence. Click, 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 click. It seemed to be moving, circling the tower just as the journal had described. I was paralyzed, glued to the window, my eyes scanning the darkness for a source that I desperately did not want to find. Then, as suddenly as it began, it stopped. The silence that rushed back in was somehow worse, more menacing. I didn't eat dinner that night. I barely slept. I just sat at my desk, staring out into the oppressive darkness, listening. The next day, my check-in with Sarah felt different. "Everything all right up there, Alex?" she asked, her voice crackling over the radio. "You sound a little on edge." "Fine. Sarah, just fine," I lied, my voice strained. Just a windy night." "All right then. Keep your eyes peeled. We've got a dry spell coming. Conditions are getting tense. Tense? She had no idea. The experiences began to escalate. A few days after first hearing the clicking, I caught a glimpse of movement at the edge of my vision while scanning the horizon. It was late afternoon, the sun casting long shadows across the valleys. I saw a flicker of motion in a distant grove of aspens, something tall and unnaturally fast. When I focused my binoculars on the spot, there was nothing but the gentle trembling of leaves in the breeze. I dismissed it as a deer, but the image of its impossible height lingered. A week later, I forced myself to go down to refill my water cisterns at the base of the tower. I hadn't left the cabin since I'd first heard the clicking. As I descended the 100 feet of steel stairs, the world felt vast and exposed. Every snapped twig, every rustle of leaves in the undergrowth sent a jolt of adrenaline through me. At the base, I found something that made the blood drain from my face. Arranged in a perfect circle around the tower's concrete footings were dozens of small white stones. They weren't there before. I knew this forest floor. I had walked it, studied it. This was new. And inside the circle, arranged in a bizarre spiral pattern, were sticks and pine cones. It was deliberate, meticulous. It was a marker, a sign. Something was claiming this territory. I worked in a frantic haste, my hands shaking as I filled the water jugs. The entire time I felt the prickling sensation of being watched. The woods were silent, unnaturally so. No birds, no squirrels, just a heavy, expectant stillness. I practically ran back up the stairs, locking the trapdoor behind me as if that flimsy piece of wood could stop whatever was out there. That night, the clicking returned, louder this time, more insistent. It was directly beneath the tower. Click, 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 click. It was accompanied by a new sound, a faint, dry rustling. I imagined a tall, desiccated figure like a dead tree, its limbs scraping against the steel legs of my sanctuary. I pulled out the journals again, my hands trembling. I found another one from a woman named Eleanor Vance, who was stationed here in 1995. Her entries confirmed my worst fears. September 4th, 1995. It's leaving things for me now. Little patterns of rocks. Sometimes feathers arranged in a fan. It feels like a gift. Or a warning. The clicking is its voice, I think. It's trying to communicate. I'm starting to think it doesn't mean any harm, that it's just curious. You, Herb. Optimism was chilling. Her later entries were a descent into madness. September 18th, 1995. I was wrong. It's not curious. It's hungry. I saw its face last night. The moon was full. There was no face. Just a smooth, pale oval, like a fungus. But I could feel it looking at me. I could feel it wanting. It raised a long arm and tapped on the glass. A single, sharp tap. I think I'm going mad. That was her last entry. The ranger's log noted she had abandoned her post. My world had shrunk to the 14 by 14 foot cabin. I ate little, slept less. During the day, I was a wreck, jumping at every shadow. At night, I was a prisoner, listening to the rhythmic clicking as it circled my perch. The isolation I had craved had become a curse. There was no one to tell, no one who would believe me. I was alone with it. The entity grew bolder. I started seeing it during the day, a flash of pale movement between the trees, a long, spindly limb vanishing behind a rock outcropping. It was toying with me, letting me know it was always there. It was tall, impossibly so, a creature that seemed to be made of birch bark and shadow, all wrong angles and silent, fluid motion. The breaking point came during a thunderstorm. The forecast had warned of it, but I had secretly welcomed it. The rain and thunder would drown out the clicking. It would give me a night of peace. I was wrong. As the storm rolled in, the sky turned a bruised, sickly green. The wind howled, rattling the windows in their frames. Rain lashed against the glass, blurring the world outside. lightning illuminated the forest in stark, terrifying flashes. And with the first clap of thunder, the clicking started. Click, 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 click. It was right outside, on the catwalk. My blood ran cold. It had climbed 100 feet of steel, and it had climbed it like a spider. I scrambled away from the windows, my back pressing against the far wall, my eyes wide with terror. Tap. A sharp, loud rap on the windowpane facing west. I flinched so hard I nearly screamed. Lightning flashed, and for a split second, the catwalk was illuminated. And it was there, pressed against the glass. I only saw it for an instant, but the image is burned into my memory forever. It was taller than the window, its head bent at an unnatural angle to peer inside. The body was a gnarled, emaciated collection of limbs, the color of bleached bone. And the face. Eleanor was right. There was no face, just a smooth, blank expanse of pale flesh, featureless except for a dark, vertical slit that opened and closed in time with the clicking sound. Click, click, click. The slit pulsed. It was its mouth. I let out a choked cry of pure animal terror. It saw me. It was looking right at me. Another flash of lightning, and it had moved to the adjacent window. Its long, twig-like fingers, each ending in a dark, thorn-like nail, scraped. Against the glass, the sound like nails on a chalkboard. Scrape, tap, tap. The radio crackled to life. "Alex? Alex, you there? The storm's hitting you hard, just checking in." It was Sarah. I scrambled for the receiver, my hand shaking so violently I could barely hold it. "Sarah, Sarah, help me. It's here. It's outside," I screamed, my voice cracking. "Alex? You're breaking up. What's outside? Say again." Her voice was a distorted buzz of static. "Crack!" The window pane in front of me fractured, a spiderweb of cracks spreading from a central point. The creature had struck. It was trying to get in. It's trying to break the glass. "Sarah, for God's sake, send someone." "Don't understand. Stay calm. The storm." The radio went dead, hissing with static. The thing outside became frenzied. It began to slam its body against the walls of the cabin, the whole tower shuddering with the impacts. The clicking was deafening, a frantic, horrifying chatter. I could hear its bony limbs scraping and clattering on the metal catwalk. The windows were groaning, the glass bowing inward with each impact. I was going to die. Up here, alone, in this glass cage, torn apart by something that shouldn't exist. In pure desperation, I grabbed the fire extinguisher from the wall. It was heavy, solid. It was the only weapon I had. With a final sickening crunch, the window on the north side shattered and rain and wind blasted into the cabin. A long, pale arm, impossibly thin, snaked through the broken pane. It reached for me, its thorny fingers flexing. I didn't think. I just reacted. I rushed forward and swung the fire extinguisher with all my strength, bringing it down on the creature's arm. There was a sound like a dead branch snapping. The creature emitted a high-pitched shriek, a sound that wasn't air passing through lungs but something else entirely. The grating of rock, the tearing of dry leaves. It was a sound of pure agony. The arm withdrew in a flash. The shrieking continued outside, a sound of pure rage and pain that was somehow worse than the clicking. The impacts on the tower stopped. I stood there, panting, clutching the extinguisher, rain soaking my clothes. I watched the broken window, waiting for it to reappear, but it didn't. The shrieking receded, moving away from the tower, down into the trees, until it was finally swallowed by the storm. I stayed awake all night, huddled in a corner, watching. The broken window, listening. The storm eventually passed. The sun rose. The forest, washed clean by the rain, looked peaceful, beautiful, and utterly unchanged. It was as if nothing had happened. But the broken window, The deep scratches in the steel of the catwalk and the single thorn-like nail I found on the floor told me it was real. As soon as the radio was working, I called Sarah. I didn't scream or cry. My voice was eerily calm. "Sarah," I said, "I'm done. I'm leaving." I didn't give her an explanation. I didn't mention the creature, the clicking, or the journals. She could tell from my voice that it was not up for debate. She arranged for a helicopter to pick me up that afternoon. I packed my bag in a daze. Before I left, I took Thomas Miller's and Eleanor Vance's journals. I also took the new, blank one that had been assigned to me. I wrote a single entry. August 22nd, 2023. Don't stay. If you read this, leave. Leave now. It's real. It watches, it waits, and it learns. The clicking isn't a warning. It's a countdown. I placed the journals back in the cabinet right on top of the pile. The helicopter ride back to civilization was surreal. Looking down from above, Thornewood Peak looked like just another mountain. The lookout tower a tiny, insignificant speck. It looked peaceful, safe. It's been 2 years since that summer. I live in a city now, surrounded by the noise and the comforting anonymity of millions. I have a normal job. I try to live a normal life, but I never feel safe. I can't stand silence. I have to have a fan or a TV on to sleep, because sometimes, in the dead of night, when the city finally quiets down, I think I can hear it, faintly, in the distance. Click, 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 click. I know it's just my mind. It has to be. But I also know that there are places in this world, deep, old, and dark, that we were not meant to occupy. And I know that the thing in the woods of Thornewood Peak is still there, watching, waiting, and listening for the next lonely soul to answer the call of the wild.